The story begins with a view of a vast and deep blue ocean that seems to stretch endlessly while a woman notes that the sea remains beautiful even in another world. She stands on a balcony looking uncertain about her future as she acknowledges her new identity as Rita Scrine, who is the daughter of a noble duke. Her thoughts are interrupted when maids urgently call out to her as she stands in a daze. The scene shifts back in time to 2 weeks prior, where the woman named Yano Kane is seen bowing apologetically while her boss scolds her for a mistake that her junior colleague actually made. She lies in her bed at home looking completely exhausted and miserable while recalling how her boss kept chewing her out despite her innocence in the matter. Later she is shown sitting at a table with her friends during a girls' night out where they laugh and point out that she is the only one among them who is still single. Her friend teases her about not having a boyfriend yet and notes that being 28 years old and unmarried is an unfortunate combination. As Kane walks home alone, she thinks about love and memories of the past begin to surface in her mind. The memory takes her back to a school setting where a blushing boy named Hashina Hiroto is holding a small fox charm and nervously confessing that he likes her. Kane recalls feeling happy at that moment, but the scene shifts to show her apologizing to him and rejecting his feelings. She leaves him standing alone in the school courtyard and notes that he transferred schools shortly after, which meant she never saw him again. Back in the present, she holds the same small fox charm in her hand while lying in bed and regrets that she has never been able to move on from that day. As she wishes she could go back and redo everything, a bright and complex magic circle suddenly appears beneath her on the bed. She is engulfed in a blinding light and wakes up on the floor of a strange room where a man is staring down at her. She is confused when she hears a voice that sounds exactly like hers asking who the man is even though she didn't speak. A girl who looks exactly like Kane steps forward and introduces herself as Rita Scrine and explains that they are in a mansion owned by her family. Rita's father named Zack introduces himself, and Kane is shocked to realize she is in the presence of a duke and that the girl before her is her exact duplicate. A mage explains that he used magic to summon Kane from another world specifically because she bears an identical resemblance to Rita. Kane is overwhelmed by the absurdity of the situation as she learns she was summoned to take Rita's place in a marriage to King Eugene. Rita tries to justify the deception by claiming the king is known as a cruel wolf and a ruthless tyrant. Rita explains that her father arranged this swap out of concern for her feelings because she wants to find true love before settling down. Despite Rita claiming the king puts his country first, Kane refuses to go through with the plan and asks to be sent back home. The atmosphere turns dark as Duke Zack reveals that while they can summon people, they cannot send them back, and he ominously states that he cannot guarantee her safety if she refuses. Faced with no other choice and Rita's tearful promise that she will eventually find a way to return her, Kane reluctantly agrees to the scheme. Over the next 2 weeks, she undergoes training to act like a noblewoman while a maid named Tilda helps her prepare. Tilda comments on the king's cruel reputation and mentions that the duke went to great lengths to create a body double to save his daughter from such a marriage. Dressed in a stunning gown, Kane travels by carriage to the castle while Tilda whispers that she will not hesitate to run away if things get dangerous. Kane steps out of the carriage and walks nervously down a long hallway toward a large set of doors where King Eugene is waiting. She enters the throne room and bows deeply while introducing herself as Rita Scrine to the young ruler King Eugene Aistelot. The king sits on his throne with a cold expression and orders her to raise her head. He stands up and walks over to her before gently lifting her chin with his hand to inspect her face closely. He comments that she is acting very cold and formal for someone who has come to marry him and asks if she feels guilty about something. Kane tries to maintain her composure and replies that she is merely elated to meet him, but she screams internally with worry that he might have seen through her disguise. The king leans in very close to her face and whispers that she really resembles her, and notes that even her voice is the same. He pulls away and states that since neither of them truly wants this marriage, they will just proceed with the necessary formalities. He shows her to her prepared room and leaves her to rest after promising to talk more the following day. Once she is alone, Kane collapses onto the bed in relief and finds her luggage that was brought along with her. She happily pulls out her smartphone and the small fox charm she calls Foxy, and feels comforted by having items from her own world. While clutching the charm, she wonders aloud what the king meant when he said she resembled someone. She sighs and says out loud that she does not want to see him tomorrow, which prompts a voice from behind her to ask if that is really how she feels. Kane freezes in terror and turns around to see King Eugene standing right there in her room. She panics and accidentally drops both her phone and the fox charm onto the floor. The king notices the items and bends down to pick up the charm while glancing at the lit screen of her phone, which displays a photo of Kane and her mother. He holds up the charm and mutters the name, Foxy, which shocks Kane because he shouldn't know that name. He looks at her with intense eyes and asserts that she is not Lady Rita Scrine before demanding to know her real name. Kane realizes she is completely cornered and trembling with fear she finally confesses that her name is Yano Kane. The king stares at her in silence for a moment before his expression softens into one of recognition and disbelief. He steps closer and reveals that he is actually Hashina Hiroto, the boy from her high school memories. The story pauses on Kane's shocked face as she stares at the king who is actually her long-lost love from her original world. Kane explaining that her role was to marry the king known as the Cruel Wolf while keeping her true identity a secret. She narrates that she is actually Yano Kane and was summoned to this other world to serve as a body double for Rita Scrine. Just as she thought her life was over, the king leans in close and quickly figures out that she is not the real Rita. He looks her in the eyes and bluntly asks if she is not Rita Scrine. The scene shifts as he reveals his true name is Hashina Hiroto, which shocks Kane completely. She stares at him in disbelief while he confirms again that it is really him. Kane trembles as she calls out his name and asks if he is all right. He gently calls her Yano-san while looking at her with a soft expression. He combs his hand through his hair while sparkles appear around him, and Kane questions why he is talking like that. She frantically asks if he is truly the Hiroto from Akina High School. He tells her to look at him and confirms he is the same boy who went to that school. To prove it, he smiles and reminisces about how cleaning the garden in the fall was such a pain. Kane agrees with him while remembering those days. He then reminds her that she was on the beautification committee in their second year. Kane happily recalls a teacher nicknamed Tabasan and realizes there is no doubt about his identity. She thinks about the teacher known for awful puns and believes fully that this king is the boy she once loved. The mood shifts as Hiroto asks why she is pretending to be a noble's daughter and why she is in this world. Kane looks down shyly and admits he is right to ask before explaining that this isn't even their world. She begins to tell him the long story of how it all started. Hiroto listens intently and then suddenly bows his head deeply to apologize. He feels guilty and assumes it is his fault she is in this situation. Kane waves her hands frantically and tells him not to worry because she had no idea he was summoned too. Hiroto insists it is his fault, but Kane stops him by reminding him that he is a king now and shouldn't apologize so easily. Hiroto agrees and instantly switches his demeanor back to that of a dignified king, which surprises Kane. She clutches her chest and thinks about how scared she was when she heard he was a cruel king. Now that she knows it is Hiroto, her heart beats loudly and she stammers when he asks if she is all right. She tries to compose herself and asks how he ended up in this world, assuming he was summoned like her. Hiroto looks away with a solemn expression and reveals that he actually died. He explains that he reincarnated into this world as Eugene Aistelot after a terrible car accident with his parents. Kane stands in shock and repeats the word died as she processes this tragic news. Kane is devastated to think she would have lived her whole life without knowing he had died. She feels awful and thinks about how this revelation hurts. Hiroto gently holds her hand and tells her not to look so down because he didn't tell her this to make her sad. He explains that he inherited Eugene's memories and found life in the castle exciting because of his past memories. He smiles and mentions that he remembered how everyone on the beautification committee didn't want to be there. He says he decided to give his all in this new life just like he did back then. Kane looks at him with admiration and thinks he is amazing. Hiroto turns away and states that even though they know each other, he still has to decide how to handle her deception. Kane agrees and wonders if he could at least introduce her to some work so she can live there. She worries that he can't just let an outsider stay in his castle. Hiroto surprises her by saying he will take responsibility for her. He promises to guarantee her safety and search for a way for her to return home. He adds that if she doesn't want this marriage, he will call it off. Kane thinks about how he is treating her better than expected but hesitates when he asks if she is okay with that. She internally admits she would be happy to marry the person she loves but worries that if she refuses, he might marry someone else. She tells him she needs to think about it and mentions she wants to go home. However, she realizes that if she goes home, Hiroto won't be there. She apologizes for putting this on him so suddenly and he tells her it is fine. As he leaves the room, he pauses at the door to tell her he will always be on her side no matter what she decides. Left alone, Kane collapses on the sofa in confusion. She looks at the ceiling and struggles with her feelings for the person she has always loved. She feels she can't just abandon everything now that she finally found him, but knows that returning home means losing him forever. Suddenly a knock comes at the door and a man enters asking if she is Lady Rita Scrine. He introduces himself as Ilbert Landry and says he is her tutor. He leans in very close to her face with a flashy smile and tells her to just call him Ilbert. He explains he is there on the king's orders to teach her things she might not know. Kane is overwhelmed by his flashy appearance and sighs as he gets too close. The scene shifts to Hiroto sitting in his office looking exhausted and messy. He thinks about how Rita summoned a double to avoid marriage and how he selfishly chose the double because she looked like Kane. He feels like the worst person for being happy about this situation. He rests his head on his desk and admits to himself that Kane is his first love. Hiroto vows to keep her safe for the sake of the person he once was regardless of what she chooses. He recalls how he got rejected in their previous life and transferred schools without ever speaking to her again. He admits he ran away because he was afraid of being hurt. He stares at his old flip phone in his imagination and wonders if he should have just moved on. He knows it is too late but still wonders what if she changes her mind. His thoughts are interrupted by a knock at the door and Ilbert enters. Ilbert notices Hiroto's messy hair immediately. He cheerfully admits that he couldn't help himself and went to meet Rita today despite being told to go tomorrow. Hiroto is annoyed and thinks about how he can never get a read on his childhood friend. Ilbert explains that as a member of the parliament he needed to do a preliminary inspection. He then observes that Hiroto has been looking gloomy since leaving her room and asks if something happened. Ilbert grins and asks if Hiroto fell in love with Rita, which hits the mark. Hiroto tells him to just do his job and states that his feelings aren't that simple. Alone again, Hiroto closes his eyes and thinks that from the bottom of his heart he just wants her to be happy. He concludes that there is a limit to how greedy one can be and he could never ask for that happiness for himself. The morning after the shocking revelation, as a groggy Kane wakes up and tries to process the overwhelming reality that King Eugene is actually Hashina. While birds chirp outside, she thinks about how her brain cannot keep up with the facts that the king is Hashina. He is no longer in their original world, and she still has to face the upcoming marriage. Her maid Tilda enters the room to wish her a good morning and announces that she will assist Kane with dressing for the day. As Tilda arranges her hair, Kane notes internally that it feels strange to have someone else dress her at her age. She recalls that she was 28 when she was summoned, but realizing she has been rejuvenated, she looks in the mirror and is shocked to see her skin is smooth, firm, and she appears 10 years younger due to the summoning magic. Tilda finishes the preparations quickly and asks if anything is uncomfortable, to which Kane replies that she is adapting to this world almost too fast. When Tilda moves to serve black tea, Kane instinctively offers to help, but Tilda stops her immediately with a stern look. Tilda scolds her by explaining that as Lady Rita Scrine and a future queen, she must not act subservient to those below her or treat such tasks as natural. Kane looks dejected and apologizes, but Tilda softens her expression and asks Kane to simply call her Tilda and drop the formalities. Kane blushes and admits that treating Tilda like a close friend made her happy, causing Tilda to chuckle at her reaction. A knock at the door interrupts them, and King Eugene enters along with a cheerful Ilbert Landry. Eugene apologizes for Ilbert intruding on her room without permission the previous day, while Ilbert claims he had permission and calls the accusation slander. Eugene informs Kane that their engagement party will be held in a month and a half when the Dowager Queen returns. He explains that he called Ilbert to tutor her so she can be formally recognized as royalty through a traditional ceremony before the marriage. Kane feels the pressure of the short timeline but agrees to study hard while Eugene leaves to attend to his duties. A few days pass, and Kane is shown struggling in the library with Ilbert watching her closely. Ilbert points out that it is odd she can read the text of this world but cannot write it. Kane nervously explains that whenever she tries to write, the words blur in her head, suggesting it might be a defect of the summoning magic. Eugene suddenly appears behind a bookshelf to ask for a moment, causing Kane to jump in surprise. He apologizes for interrupting her studies and tells her she can come inside his office if she wants to talk, but then immediately states he has several meetings lined up and must go. As Eugene walks away, Kane watches his back and thinks that she might start feeling lonely because he is always so busy they barely get to talk. Suddenly, Eugene stops and tells her to hold out her hands before placing a small wooden box into them. He reveals it is black tea for her to drink during her breaks, and Kane beams with happiness as she thanks him while he walks away. Kane cherishes the gift and wonders if Hashina ever smiled like that in their old life or if it is just his demeanor as King Eugene. She realizes that despite his busy schedule, he has visited her almost every day to check on her and personally delivered the tea. Kane reflects that Eugene is actually a very kind person and questions the rumors that call him the cruel wolf. She asks Ilbert about the nickname, noting that while his face and aura can be terrifying, he has treated them well. Ilbert becomes serious and explains that Fighterix is one of the biggest countries on the continent. He describes how Eugene fights with an incredible and invisible burden on his shoulders to ensure the continued existence of hundreds of millions of people. Ilbert then looks at Kane intensely and asks if she has the resolve to help him carry that heavy burden. Kane is unable to reply, and Ilbert breaks the tension by laughing and joking that he doesn't want her to run away in the middle of the night. Tilda scolds Ilbert for making Kane uncomfortable, but the question lingers in Kane's mind. She imagines herself standing on a balcony as Queen waving to a crowd and feels overwhelming anxiety, thinking she cannot possibly handle such a role. She begins to think it might be best if Hashina didn't choose her as his queen because she lacks the resolve and decisiveness. Late that night, a knock comes at her door, and Eugene enters holding a book. He explains that he wanted to return the book she had lent to Ilbert, mentioning that he used it to practice writing. They discuss the language barrier again, comparing her inability to write to being able to read English but not spell it. Eugene then tells her to wait a moment and produces a map of the castle. He explains that the castle is built like a labyrinth and she might need the map if she decides to stay. As Eugene turns to leave, apologizing for keeping her up, Kane grabs his sleeve and stops him. She tells him he is not in the way and asks him to stay a little longer while she makes tea. Over tea, Eugene asks to hear what she did after high school, and Kane shares that she worked until she graduated university but regrets being so busy she couldn't even get a part-time job. Eugene laughs innocently at her stories, and Kane thinks to herself that he is nothing like a cruel wolf. The atmosphere becomes tender as Eugene suddenly apologizes to her. He explains that he is sorry for not sparing her much time while she has been struggling with her studies, admitting he must have made her feel uneasy. Kane reassures him that it couldn't be helped due to his work. Eugene looks at her with a soft expression and confesses that seeing her work hard gives him energy and makes him feel at ease. He admits he wants to see her even if it is unreasonable. Kane blushes and agrees that she feels the same way, but internally she admits that her studies are hard and she feels on the verge of breaking. However, looking at his back, she realizes he shoulders an immense responsibility and helps her as if it were nothing to him. She decides that she wants to help him carry that burden too. With a determined smile, she looks at him and formally accepts his marriage proposal. Kane sitting quietly as she humbly accepts the marriage proposal while holding a teacup. Her maid Tilda suddenly bursts into the room with a shocked expression and loudly announces that a letter has arrived from the Scrine family. Kane is confused by Tilda's panic until she reads the letter and learns that the real Rita Scrine has made up her mind to marry King Eugene. The letter explains that the real Rita is now living as Layla, who is supposedly Rita's younger twin sister, and that her father was relieved she was safe. In the letter, the real Rita apologizes from the bottom of her heart for dragging Kane into the situation due to her own selfish wish. Kane notices that the ink on the paper is smudged, which suggests that Rita must have cried while writing it. Rita writes that she will treasure the time Kane has given her and promises not to let it go to waste. She also apologizes for not being able to tell Kane about King Eugene's true identity sooner and admits they still haven't found the certain method to send Kane back home yet. As Kane sits on the sofa processing this, she realizes that if they find a way for her to return, she will go back to being just Yano Kane and Hashino won't be there with her. She decides to stop thinking about that painful possibility for now and wonders what she will do if that time really comes. Later, Tilda formally announces that it is time for Kane's dance lesson. Tilda acts like a strict instructor as she scolds Kane for having a bent back and reminds her that posture is the most basic of basics. As Kane struggles to stop shaking, she thinks that Tilda has become a completely different person during these lessons. Tilda warns her that if she embarrasses King Eugene at the engagement party, it would affect the family's status and reputation. Kane is terrified by the pressure and dramatically imagines their heads being chopped off if she fails. Suddenly, Ilbert enters the room with a cheerful smile and tells them that King Eugene wouldn't execute anyone over something like dancing. He pats Kane on the head like a child and praises her for practicing, which makes Kane feel like she is being treated like a kid. Ilbert offers to serve as her practice partner because nothing beats hands-on experience. Although Kane hesitates and asks him to be gentle, Ilbert insists that it is better to dance with a partner than alone. They begin to dance vigorously, and Kane quickly becomes exhausted and asks for a break to catch her breath. Ilbert critiques her balance and tells her she is too slow to turn, while Kane notices he hasn't even broken a sweat. As they practice, Kane's mind begins to wander, and she imagines a romantic scenario of dancing with King Eugene surrounded by sparkles. Ilbert notices her distracted expression and teases her about imagining the king. He encourages her to do her best to make that fantasy a reality and assures her she will get the hang of it soon. Just then, King Eugene walks through the door and asks what they are doing. Kane is startled to see him, and she notices he seems to be glaring at her, which makes her wonder if he is angry. Ilberd quickly explains that he is helping with dance lessons to get her ready for the real event. He then excitedly suggests that King Eugene should take over as her practice partner for the next dance. Ilberd pressures Eugene by saying it is his duty as both the king and her future husband to help her. Kane tries to decline out of fear that she might step on his foot and get executed, but Eugene steps forward and gently asks for her hand. Kane places her hand in his and wishes she could tell what he is thinking just by touch. She reflects on how her feelings get censored when she thinks about him as King Eugene, even though she has liked Hashina for years. Eugene gently tells her to stop looking down so they can begin, and Kane realizes it is unfair to let her feelings depend entirely on him. As they start dancing, she looks up at his face and thinks he looks kind, just like when he gave her the black tea. Suddenly, Kane trips and cries out that she is going to fall. Eugene reacts instantly and catches her in his arms, calling out her name. He holds her close in a hug and asks if she is all right. Kane is flustered by how close his face is and stammers that she is fine. She asks him to let go because he isn't budging, and her heart beats loudly in her chest. Eugene finally releases her, apologizes, and says that everything is good as long as she isn't hurt. In the background, Ilberd watches with Tilda and comments that the scene looks like mutual love, while Tilda describes it as youth caught between friendship and love. A knock at the door interrupts the moment, and Eugene goes to answer it. His personal aide hands him a letter. Eugene reads it and informs everyone that the Dowager Queen will be returning from her duties next week and wants to arrange a meeting as soon as possible. The story jumps to the night before the meeting, where Kane is too nervous to sleep. She wanders the hallway thinking about getting some tea and wishing for a script on how to greet in-laws. She accidentally ends up in front of King Eugene's room and decides to leave so she doesn't look suspicious. However, Eugene opens the door before she can leave and asks what is wrong. Kane is startled and lets out a small scream, but Eugene invites her inside. He guesses correctly that she is too nervous about tomorrow to sleep. Kane admits she is worried about messing up the wedding or being exposed as a fake by the Dowager Queen. Eugene looks at her tenderly and reassures her that she will be fine because he knows how much effort she has put in since arriving. Kane worries about having an otherworldly aura, which makes Eugene laugh. He reminds her that he is in the same situation as a person from another world with memories, yet the Queen Dowager doesn't suspect him. He tells her to relax and recognize how much she has grown. Eugene promises to be right beside her and have her back no matter what happens at the wedding or reception. He vows to keep her safe no matter what, causing Kane's heart to race again. She thanks him and promises to do her best as well. The following day arrives with a dazzlingly clear sky for the meeting with the Dowager Queen, and Kane reflects that Eugene is always the one protecting her. King Eugene opens the large double doors and informs Kane that his mother is waiting inside. Kane nervously prepares herself for the meeting and walks into the room while apologizing for keeping the Dowager Queen waiting. As she enters, she sees a beautiful woman sitting elegantly on a sofa and realizes this is the Dowager Queen. However, the Queen's demeanor shifts instantly as she jumps up with a bubbly smile to grab Kane's hands and thanks her for coming while expressing how glad she is to finally meet her. Eugene immediately scolds his mother for being too frank and warns that she will put a burden on Rita, leaving Kane shocked that the Dowager Queen is so straightforward. The Queen apologizes for getting carried away by her happiness and introduces herself as Christmarie Aistelot, the mother of the stern-looking Eugene. Kane notes internally that even his own mother thinks he looks too stern as she formally introduces herself as Rita Skrine. Christmarie tells her there is no need to be so formal and then scolds Eugene for standing there silently like a big tree before inviting them to sit for tea. As they drink tea, Christmarie chatters happily and jokes that if she ran into a bear she would probably just run away on the spot, while Kane notices that Eugene seems fed up and has stopped listening. Christmarie complains that Eugene always puts on an arrogant face and admits she had given up hope because she thought her son would never get married. She reveals that she never heard of him taking an interest in anyone or trying to find a bride, which makes Kane realize that King Eugene has never had a girlfriend in this world. Kane feels strangely relieved by this information but quickly dismisses the feeling as she wonders why she cares. The conversation takes a dangerous turn when Christmarie asks where the two of them met, causing Kane to panic because she cannot say they met on a high school committee. Eugene saves her by coldly interrupting and stating that he didn't come there to waste time with empty chatter. Chris Marie instantly changes her attitude and tells Eugene to leave so she and Rita can have fun without him. She guilt-trips him by mentioning how much she looked forward to this while handling his duties, so Eugene agrees to work in the room next door and leaves them alone. Once they are alone, the atmosphere becomes tense as Chris Marie looks at Kane seriously and asks what she thinks about marrying Eugene. Kane feels the pressure but decides to be honest, admitting that while she was scared at first because of the rumors, she quickly realized he is actually a good and kind person. She states firmly that she considers it a great honor and wants to become a queen who can support the king. Chris Marie suddenly breaks the tension by demanding to see flowers, confusing Kane completely. They leave the room, but instead of heading to the garden, Chris Marie leads her down a staircase into a dark underground tunnel. Kane recognizes the path from the map Eugene gave her and is relieved she memorized it, realizing the map was leading to an exit. They emerge from the tunnel into a blindingly beautiful field of flowers outside the castle. Chris Marie explains that these are escape tunnels designed to let people evacuate to a city in the forest if the castle comes under attack. She tells Kane that while the king has a duty to fight until his last breath, it is the queen's duty to remember this path and lead everyone to safety in his stead. Chris Marie then tests Kane by asking what she would do after fulfilling her duty of evacuating everyone. Kane thinks for a moment and answers that she would come back to the dangerous castle. She admits she would stupidly return to stand by King Eugene's side, inspired by a story she heard about an old queen named Eanes who fought to protect her king from a traitor. Kane explains that since she cannot use a sword, she wants to do her best to work with him to prevent any attacks in the first place. Chris Marie smiles and reveals that everything, including bringing her to the tunnel, was a test to gauge her character and see how serious she was about supporting the king. She apologizes for testing her but declares that she now understands Kane is very well suited to be Eugene's wife. Chris Marie shares her own wish to find allies Eugene can trust because he rules through fear and is isolated, and she wonders where her son found such a wonderful girl. They return to the castle where Eugene is waiting anxiously to ensure Rita is safe. The story moves to the engagement ceremony where Chris Marie places a tiara on Kane's head and asks her to take good care of Eugene. Eugene smiles warmly at her and they share a beautiful dance in the ballroom surrounded by sparkles and onlookers. A few days later, the scene shifts to Chris Marie looking shocked as she learns from Ilbert that Eugene and Rita have never gone on a date alone since she arrived at the castle. She apologizes for having a useless son who doesn't understand a woman's heart and scolds Kane for being too understanding of his work. Chris Marie reminisces about her own romantic dates with the previous king and happily declares that she will plan a date for Rita and Eugene to go on the very next day, with Kane standing outside the castle, nervously waiting for King Eugene for their scheduled date. She worries that he might not show up since the date was decided only yesterday, but is relieved when she sees him approaching. However, her relief turns to confusion when she notices Ilbert walking alongside Eugene, cheerfully asking why it isn't obvious that he would be there. Eugene, clearly annoyed, tells Ilbert to piss off, but Ilbert just laughs and claims he wouldn't miss such a joyous occasion as the king's first date with a girl. Ilbert then playfully reminds Kane not to worry about her usual duties and to just focus on enjoying herself. As they prepare to leave, a coachman offers to help Kane into the carriage, but Eugene steps in and insists on helping her up himself. Inside the carriage, Kane marvels at the view outside the castle, admitting she was too nervous to notice anything when she first arrived. Eugene gazes at her with a soft expression but then looks away, seemingly troubled. Kane misinterprets his silence as disapproval of the date and starts to apologize for taking time out of his busy day. Eugene quickly corrects her, explaining that he was also looking forward to today but feels awkward because he wasn't the one who invited her and has no idea how to act on a date. Kane is touched by his honesty and suggests they just focus on having a wonderful day together, playfully calling him King Eugene. Eugene corrects her, reminding her that they are undercover today and should use the names Jean and Lena. Kane blushes at the intimacy of calling each other by first names, feeling like they are lovers. The carriage arrives in town, and Eugene instructs Kane to stay close to him for safety. As they walk through the bustling city, Kane is amazed by its prosperity and realizes how much Eugene cares for his people. While window shopping, Kane spots a cute bracelet in a jewelry shop that reminds her of her fox charm. Eugene notices her interest and immediately decides to buy it for her, despite Kane's protests about the price. He insists on giving it to her as a memory of their first date. Kane is moved by the gesture, noting that it is the first time he has given her something since they reunited in this world. They continue exploring the city, enjoying street performances and the vibrant atmosphere. However, in the crowd, Kane gets separated from Eugene. She panics and calls out his name but is suddenly grabbed by a drunk man who harasses her about her new bracelet. The man grabs her arm painfully, and just as Kane cries for help, Eugene appears and forcefully intervenes. He glares at the drunkard with terrifying intensity, demanding an apology. The man, terrified by Eugene's cruel wolf aura, apologizes profusely and flees. The crowd murmurs in fear, recognizing the king and his frightening reputation. Eugene quickly leads Kane away to a quieter spot and apologizes for letting her experience something scary. Kane, however, blames herself for getting lost and causing a scene. She notices Eugene looks dejected about how the people reacted to him, but he assures her he is used to it. To cheer him up, Kane points out that the day isn't over yet. They travel to a beautiful grape orchard and winery, where the atmosphere is much warmer. The workers greet Eugene with genuine smiles and gratitude, welcoming him warmly. Kane is surprised by the friendly reception and learns from a worker that Eugene personally saved the region from a drought by investigating and solving the water issue. The worker describes Eugene as their personal messiah and explains that while his face might be intense, he is a very kind king who works hard for his people. Kane smiles, happy to see others acknowledging his true nature. They enjoy wine and cheese together, and Kane gets a little tipsy from the delicious drink. As they leave, the workers wish them a happy marriage, making Kane blush. In the carriage ride back, Kane thanks Eugene for the wonderful day and the memories. She falls asleep on his shoulder, murmuring that she had fun. Eugene smiles tenderly, whispers, "Me too," and tells her to sleep tight as